Welcome back to another episode of the It Feels Like Magic podcast, the podcast where I experience 4Kids Winx for the first time and share my thoughts with you all. Today we're going over episodes 17 and 18 of Season 1, Royal Heartbreak and Senior Witches Go to Earth. If you'd like to follow along and watch the 4Kids dub with me, then check out the official It Feels Like Magic YouTube channel. It has playlists of the 4Kids episodes and soundtrack there. And if you enjoyed the podcast, then please give a follow wherever you're listening so that you don't miss new episodes. With all that said, let's get into it, shall we?
Watch the dub and open my mind. Believe in 4Kids. Time to unwind. Can it be true? Let's wait and see if 4Kids dub can do everything amazing. Rewatching Winx, come join the fun. Rewatching Winx. Let's have some fun. Rewatching Winx.
Episode 17, Royal Heartbreak. As always, I'm going to give a quick synopsis of the episode before I get into my notes so that you're all caught up on what's going on. There's a huge event at Red Fountain where Sky's parents are attending. The Winx sneak their way over to see what's going on. While there, Bloom bumps into Diaspro, who she thinks is Icy in disguise. She embarrasses herself in front of everyone by attacking Diaspro and learns the truth of the situation the hard way. Sky and Brandon have switched identities and Sky is engaged to Diaspro. All of this sudden information proves to be too much for Bloom and she's in complete shock. And that's everything you need to know about the episode, so let's start going through my notes. So for these batch of episodes, I found the dialogue really enjoyable and funny in general, so there are a lot of times when I just took note of something that made me laugh. One example is when Bloom is trying to get into contact with Sky. I can't remember what happens originally, but I do remember that they're on bad terms because of the fact that they went into Cloud Tower last time and Bloom thought that she was a witch because of the, for lack of a better word, trick that the tricks played on her. And Sky was afraid of her because he thought that she was a witch. And since then, they haven't really been speaking to each other. So anyways, Bloom is trying to talk to Sky during all this to try to cut through the ice or whatever. And Stella instructs her to start by talking about the weather first and then transition into what she actually wants to say. And the way that Bloom goes about this was really funny to me. I know that talking about the weather when you have nothing to say is the oldest trick in the book and nothing new, but the way that it was dragged on and just the lines themselves that was used for this made me laugh a lot. And then to make matters even more hilarious, Sky tries to get out of the conversation with Bloom, and his solution is to give a loud beep, not once, but I think 2 or 3 times, to try to weasel his way out of the conversation when it was super obvious that he was making the sound by himself. And that was probably the hardest that I've ever laughed watching the 4Kids version, honestly. And then for another line that stood out to me, but more so for being shocking, I guess also funny, but shocking, was when the Winx were trying to sneak their way into Red Fountain for the event. They're talking to like a security guard or bouncer or whatever. And eventually the Winx are discovered that they're not supposed to be there, and he starts chasing them off. And after they completely disappear into the wind or wherever they go, in the 4Kids version, he exclaims, "What a bunch of groupies," which I was not expecting. Once again, in the 4Kids version, that took me completely off guard. We still have even more lines that stood out to me from this episode, though, before getting into like plot stuff. So after that, we see Farragonda and Headmistress Griffin sitting together, and they're kind of riffing off of each other and talking about the old days. And we discovered that at one point they were dating the same guy from Red Fountain. And when they found out that he was two-timing them, they turned him into a goat, which I thought was a really funny and just cute way of showing the history between the two of them. Another thing that I found pretty funny was the narration that was done all throughout this event to make it feel more grand and like something that we're actually attending. They introduced a king and queen of Heraklion, and the introductions that they gave them was really funny to me. So for the king, they introduced him as an award-winning author, and for the queen, they introduced her as a former model and philanthropist, which feels super out of place for a fantasy king and queen, but it was just a nice laugh, so I appreciated that. Something that isn't a line, finally, because there were just a lot of winners in this one. I thought it was interesting that they tried to give a name to the projection that we often see in early versions of the show. So Diaspro is looking at this hologram slash projection of Brandon slash Sky, and Bloom refers to it as a photo-hologram. I think that's how you say it. And I just thought that was really cute that they actually gave a name to it, because they didn't in the original, even though we see that contraption a lot in the series. And I just think it's nice that they tried to name things and explain stuff, because the world that Winx Club takes place in is really interesting, and I want to know more about it. Finally, something related to the plot that I noted for this episode. I thought it was even weirder how Bloom decided to turn on Diaspro in this. So in the original, Bloom meets Diaspro, and Diaspro is talking to Sky slash Brandon and reveals that he's her boyfriend. And when Bloom hears this, she thinks that it's a trick being played on her because of what the tricks pulled not too long ago with the whole her being one of the ancestral witches. So she sort of had a reason to be on edge. She still was impulsive, but her reasoning did make sense. Whereas here, I had a hard time following. So just like the original, Bloom bumps into Diaspro, but we don't know that she and Sky are engaged, and Bloom exclaims that Diaspro is icy after she calls her a loser and laughs. And I just could not connect the dots from that. I think it was supposed to be the same, where she assumes that it's something similar to what just happened to her, but she doesn't say anything that makes you think that. You have to infer it. So it was just really confusing and just comical how hard she was going after Diaspro and how dead certain she was that she was icy, even though she has nothing to go off of for that. But on a lighter note, Teen Fairy is back. I noted on this in a previous episode and said that it was really cute and clever that they were sort of trying to bring things from our real world in terms of pop culture and then inserting it into Winx Club, but making it more relevant to the universe there. It's just like a fun, cheeky nod. And it's back again, as I just said. Diaspro goes with Bloom because she thinks she's being interviewed for Teen Fairy, which was cool. And speaking of Diaspro, there was one line that actually, several lines she had that had me laughing my brains out. So, when they're fighting, Diaspro thinks that Bloom is a crazy fan, which makes more sense, I think, than what was originally done. I don't really know what she thought of Bloom at that point, just that she was crazy, but adding the, stalker fan to it just makes more sense to me. So anyways, Bloom calls Diaspro a witch at one point, and what Diaspro says to this is that in spite of what the tabloids may say, I'm not a witch. Which I found really funny that they kind of make it canonical that Diaspro is so cold-hearted and mean that everyone thinks that she's secretly a witch. And then she continues by saying that she can be witchy when needed, which adds on to that witch euphemism that 4Kids is known so well for in their Winx Club dub. Yeah, that's actually almost everything I have to say. There's just two more points I guess I'd like to make. First off, I realized just how weird it is that Bloom is kind of blamed for this entire situation. Don't get me wrong, she definitely has some fault here. She should not have gone at it with Diaspro just because she thought maybe, just maybe, the tricks were scheming something because of Diaspro's relationship with Sky, but she definitely took things out of hand. However, it was not just her who ruined the event. Sky and Riven were going at it the entire time and even had their dragons fighting each other. Bloom just happened to be there during the climax of it all, yet the show kind of treats it like Bloom was the one who ruined the whole event. And yeah, she added to the flames, but it was not her fault. So that kind of actually made me a bit upset. I feel bad. And then to close off this episode, the last line that we hear that was also one of my favorites is when Bloom's just completely done with everything and super upset with Sky. She says, "I'm done with boys. I'm sticking with bunnies," which out of context is super, super funny. But regardless of how you take it, I just really liked the line. I really enjoyed the 4Kids version of this episode. Like, pretty much all of my notes were just going through funny lines that I noticed, which was great. I had a blast just watching, and that's good. So, good on you, 4Kids. They did good. Let's move on to the next one.
We are the Winx.
Episode 18, Senior Witches Go to Earth. As always, here's a quick synopsis to get you guys up to speed. Bloom is upset over what went down at Red Fountain, so she decides to go back home without saying anything. The Tricks discover that she's on Earth and use the opportunity to take the dragon flame from her. This is also when they reveal the truth of Bloom's origins to her. Now powerless, Bloom has no choice but to team up with the Winx in order to fight back against the witches, otherwise the universe will be at stake. And that's all you need to know about the episode, so let's go through my notes. So first off, something that I didn't know in the last one is the fact that everything that happened at the event was taken super seriously. The Winx are scolded by Faragonda and Griselda and are told that there's a possibility that they'll be expelled. And on top of that, their powers have been diluted, so they only have 50% of what they can normally use, which makes them kind of defenseless in a way. And at first, I thought this was an original, but I did go back, and as far as I could see, it's not. And it really got me thinking, why weren't they punished more in the original? They snuck off in order to get into this high-profile event. And then, although I do think Bloom wasn't solely responsible, she did add to that same event being ruined. So, honestly, this is totally expected. I'm not really sure why they didn't get chewed out like this in original, so I think that was a positive change. Moving on to a bit of a happier note, though, when Bloom's telling the Winx that she wants to leave, in this version she's kind of doing so partially because she feels guilty about everything and getting the Winx into trouble, which makes her leaving in the first place make more sense. People kind of joke how she always leaves whenever she gets the littlest bit upset. But with everything that's happened, almost getting her and her friends expelled, learning that she's been completely lied to from the guy that she likes, and then what went down with the Tricks recently, it makes sense for her to kind of want to take a break from everything. So when she's telling the Winx about all of this, they are super supportive and sweet. It was genuinely really touching. For example, one line that stood out to me was when Tekna said, "Do you know how low the probability of finding another amazing friend like you is?" Which I thought was super, super sweet, especially since Tekna's supposed to be really cut off emotionally originally. So we can see just how far she's come through this one piece of dialogue. So I really liked that. Then when Bloom does inevitably leave, we get a new song. Wings, I believe it's called. Uh, I don't know why, but the first line of this is just hilarious to me. It feels like something that'd be a quick cut in a funny compilation video or something. I'll play it for you to see if I'm the only one who feels this way. Podcast listeners might not be able to understand what I mean, but the soundbite with the visual is just really funny to me. Let me know if I'm the only one. I don't know if my brain's just broken or something, but here it is. Turned around. So yeah, that always makes me laugh. I don't know why, but it does. However, I will say, the song itself, I really, really like it. I think it's one of my favorites, honestly. It's a really good emotional ballad, and I think I actually might like it more than the original. So that is a definite point for the 4Kids version. Nice. Now for unnecessary censorship, which 4Kids is known for. Normally they change Japanese text into English in order to localize it more in their anime dubs, and in this version they sort of did the same thing, except it wasn't even an actual language. It was supposed to be a language from the magic universe plastered on the wall, and they felt like they absolutely had to put English text over it for some reason. And the text reads Transportus Station, which sounds straight out of like a Harry Potter fanfiction or something, but it's endearing. One thing that was changed in the 4Kids version I found kind of weird is the fact that the Winx go to Fergonda and Griselda once they realize Bloom is missing, and they basically tell them, tough luck for Bloom then, you're all in trouble, you can't help her. We'll talk about this another time. Whereas originally, she scolds the Winx for letting Bloom leave like that and seemed concerned, whereas there is no concern to be found here. And I get it, they're in trouble, but Bloom has a giant target on her back, and Fergonda knows this, yet she seems completely unfazed and does nothing to help, which I thought was something that shouldn't be the case. But let's get to some more funny lines, shall we? Because there are some real gems in these 2 episodes. When the Tricks corner Bloom and Gardenia with Nut, they say that he's new and improved. He's been working out, ogre Pilates and such. And then when Nut fails to deliver in terms of fighting, they respond by saying, we're so not renewing his gym membership. Which was a good 2-parter to that line. They followed through and they made something really funny. And something that just like baffled me with how weird it was one of Stormy's attacks. I believe she says electric booty kick, and then she hits Bloom in the behind with a, what's it called, bolt of lightning or whatever. And it was already like kind of there from the visuals, but hearing booty kick added to it just made it feel really juvenile and funny. But I'm not really complaining, it was just weird. Then last funny thing that I noticed, I guess, although I suppose it's kind of dated now, is the fact that the Tricks say that what's been going on with Bloom has been all over the chat rooms. Which I just kind of find it funny how the Tricks, who are dead set on taking over the universe and all that, at the end of the day are still just teenagers and spend a good chunk of their time on social media. Yeah, I think that's it in terms of funny stuff that I noticed. On more of a serious note, I felt that this scene where they're stealing Bloom's powers from her and holding her parents hostage was handled really well. It felt a lot more threatening due to the new dialogue that they had, and the Trix's VAs also just gave really good vocal performances. So it took the scene to new heights that it hadn't reached before, at least in the Cinelume/Rai version. So I really enjoyed that. And a small thing, but it's something I noticed before. When the Tricks are summoning those crystals or whatever they are, I can't remember what they're called originally. In the Cinelume version, I'm not sure about the Italian, but in the Cinelume version, it's really uncomfortable but hilarious whenever they do that, because there's just intense growling and moaning for like a really, really long time that feels way too much for what they're actually doing. And I feel like 4Kids did a good job of still having that there, but without making it obnoxious or anything. So that was another thing they improved. And yeah, that's everything that I wrote down. Once again, this was a really solid episode from 4Kids. I only had really one nitpick. That was Farraganda not caring about the Winx, which was funny but concerning. But in general, I really enjoyed it. There were lots of standout lines, and the climax of the episode felt really intense. So props were deserved, okay? Good job, 4Kids. And that's all I have to say this time around. Thanks for sticking with me while I ramble about 4Kids Winx. Next time we'll be going over episodes 19 and 20 of the Season 1 4Kids Winx dub. Hope you'll look forward to it, and before I go, don't forget to keep a little magic in your life.